Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the IVPN Students Professional Development Committee Research Journey Program from Planning to Promotion. I want to welcome all of you for those who are joining us. And I'm happy. My name is Dua Ahmed, Chairperson of Professional Development of the IVPN Students of this mandate, 2022-2023. And welcome to all of you for joining us for week 2 of the research program. We are going to start a few minutes from now. In the meanwhile, I want for those who are active to write down on the chat box your how you feel from the last session and how you are excited for today's session. So if you are active and you can write down on the chat box, I'm here to read what you are going to say. Thank you. If you can write in the chat box your experience from the last session and how you are excited for today's session. Okay. Okay, Yusra said, I'm more excited. It was a very helpful session. Thank you for sharing knowledge. I am unable to see the chat second. I'm only seeing a Q&A session. Yeah, you can write on it. Okay, the last session was extremely informative and an excellent introduction to the world of research and publishing. Okay. I have learned a lot. Okay, Muhammad said, I have learned a lot in the last session, and I'm looking forward for the upcoming sessions. Thank you, Muhammad. Okay. Okay, thank you all for your response up to this. I'm going to reintroduce Dr. Garris. You already know it, but for those who are new joining us for week 2, I will introduce him, our speaker for today's session. Dr. Gareth is a prolific scientific author who has published more than 300 articles in a peer-reviewed journal over the last 20 years, including Nature's Science, proceeding of the National Academy, and other high-profile outlets. Gareth is uniquely positioned to teach and advise with authority on all aspects of scientific publishing, process, grant writing, and personal development, as he is experienced teacher, reviewer, editor, and journal manager, with a strong background in technical and popular writing. He is accredited as a course reader and teacher for a higher education authority in the UK, as well as by Irish. Dr. Gareth, the floor is yours for today's session. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be back. Nice to see so many people from our previous session here again with us today. And yes, I also can't see the chat box, so maybe we need to enable that. I don't know, but people can also, of course, use the Q&A. Don't be shy. We welcome your comments, your feedback, anything you'd like to say to us over the course of our session this afternoon, this evening. So thank you once again for the opportunity to do this. Gareth is my name. You've got my contact information there on the screen. And this is part two in our 4-part training series. Last week, we talked about research planning, journal selection, and starting to put together your research message, starting to put together your research article. Today, we're talking about research writing. And as I mentioned last time, we welcome all of your comments, all of your feedback. Everybody's going to get a certificate. Everybody will get a recording of this event as well. So don't be shy. Do put the information, the comments into the chat box. I was introduced already by our wonderful colleague just now. And thank you so much for that. I'm Gareth Dyke. I worked for a number of years in England, in Ireland, in the United States, and in Hungary, writing and publishing academic articles. So it's my honor, my pleasure to have the chance to do this, to work with IVPN to present this training course. Thank you once again for the opportunity to do this. You're probably thinking, what are we going to talk about this evening? What's on the agenda? Well, we're going to talk about 3 things tonight, building on what we talked about last time. First thing we'll discuss are English communication skills. Secondly, we're going to talk a little bit about some common mistakes that people do tend to make when writing and publishing articles in English. And what we do, we edit hundreds of thousands of papers every year. We work on many, many, many academic articles. So there's really nothing new that happens. Like the kinds of questions that researchers ask, the kinds of mistakes that researchers make are pretty much the same year on year on year. So what does that mean for you? It means that if you know about the kinds of mistakes that researchers tend to make, you can avoid making them in your own academic writing. And then finally, this evening, we're going to build on what we've learned, English communication skills and common mistakes in English, by talking a little bit about putting together the different parts of your research article, academic writing. What's the point of doing this? Well, the point of doing this, of course, is to help you become more effective as a writing and publishing academic. That's the reason that we do this. That's the reason that we present all of this content, to help you get better at writing and publishing. So let's get going. Let's get into it. Let's begin with some information about English language publication skills, the hamster wheel, the round and round and round, the circuit that we go with all of our research ideas to impact. You come up with an idea, you often have to get funding for that idea. Then you've got to collect data to test a hypothesis, to fill in a knowledge gap. Last time we talked about article planning, journal selection. This evening, we're going to talk about article writing, paper writing, and then later we'll talk about peer review, the submission process, and developing impact post-publication as an author. Now, we all get emails like this all of the time. Dear sir, dear madam, many thanks for asking whether we'd like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but unfortunately, we're simply not able to publish it. The good bits, they're not original, and the original bits, they're not good. Yours faithfully, the editors. We do tend to get rejection letters a lot. It's not something that happens. It happens to everybody. I've gotten hundreds of rejection letters over the course of my academic career. It happens all the time. And the main reasons that academic publishers, that journals around the world reject articles submitted to them is because of these reasons. We conducted surveys. We talked to publishers around the world. We asked them, why do you reject papers that get submitted to your journals? We know that excellent research is being submitted by researchers all over the world all the time. There's no reason why your research will not be any better than the research being done in any other country. But international publishers tend to reject our fantastic research, often because of issues, as you can see here, including English language. It can be a major barrier to success writing up and publishing academic research. So that's why we're here. That's what we aim to help you with, writing and publishing in English. And of course, English, luckily or unluckily, it's the universal language for scientific communication. And as I hope to convince you in our presentation this evening, your English language writing can be fun. It can be improved. You can enhance your English language writing skills. It's a skill, not a talent. Of course, you wouldn't just pick up a trumpet and start to play it. You wouldn't get in a car and just drive off down the road. You would take training. You would learn how to improve your skills. And we hope to convince you that the writing process can be beneficial as an intellectual activity in its own right. But the question is, how? How can I improve my English writing skills? Well, of course, it's a major blockage. And your academic research message, brilliant though it may be, fantastic though your research, I'm sure, absolutely is, you can get that buried in language issues. It's an issue, a problem, a blocker for researchers all over the world for whom English is not their native language. Writing up their research and getting it published in high impact SCI and Scopus listed journals can be a major issue. So we're here to help. We are going to help you with your writing and publishing in terms of your English communication skills. So ask yourself, how do you feel when faced with a difficult writing task? What do you do when you start to write an academic paper? Do you carefully construct a plan before you begin? Because you should. You need a plan. If English is not your native language, then you need to be like Arnold. Here in the middle of the slide, you need to make a plan before you start to write. And we talked about this in our session last week. Research planning, article planning, very, very important. But of course, you may remember from our previous session last week, what's the one thing that you need to have in mind before you begin to write your next academic article? Well, you need to know your message. What is it that you want people to gain from reading your paper? What is the take-home message? And also the structure and the audience. And these come from having a target journal in mind before you start to write. Don't just sit there, as we talked about last week, and begin to type away at your computer. You need a structure. Where does the structure come from? It comes from having a target journal in mind. So be like Arnold, think about your writing before you begin, and we will get into the main ways in which you can be effective in English, which is actually quite different from a number of other languages. Writing in English, keep those sentences short, no unnecessary words, familiar words, prefer the active to the passive voice, appropriate style and punctuation. I'll teach you about those last two, but this is a real paper published in the Journal of Applied Cognitive Psychology. The consequences of erudite vernacular utilized without necessity, the problems of using long words needlessly. You need in your English writing to keep it short and keep it simple so that other people can understand your message and understand the meaning of your paper. Don't forget that your message is critically important. That's the number one thing for you to think about as you get going with your writing. So I could write this. In order to ascertain the efficaciousness of the program, participants who took part in the survey were interrogated at some point upon program completion. What does it mean? It would be much better, much easier for you to put in something simple and effective like this. To determine the success of the program, we questioned the participants afterwards. Avoid complex writing. Keep it simple. One of the main things to do in your English writing is to keep your message simple and straightforward, keeping your readers in mind, which is something else we talked about last week. Who are the people writing and publishing academic papers in English around the world? People in non-native speaking countries. 80% or more of the research that you write will be read by non-native speakers. And Einstein, our friend, was famous for saying the definition of genius is taking the complex and making it simple. People often ask, won't using simple language in my writing make me appear less intelligent? No, 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 no. You want to write clearly and simply to be accessible to readers in other disciplines and, of course, for readers for whom English is not their first language. Writing in your native language is a different story. Writing in English for your readers who probably won't be native speakers is a different matter. Simple, short sentences, effective word use, keeping it simple rather than complex. The majority of academic papers are read by non-native speakers, and so simple and direct is the best way to go with your writing. Here's that reiteration of those rules for effective writing. And we looked at the pyramid shape for an academic paper briefly in our last session as well. In the introduction, you start general and then you get more specific towards the end of that section. I'll come back to that later when we start to talk about writing your introduction. Short sentences, no unnecessary words, familiar words, active rather than passive voice, style, punctuation, and conciseness are key for you to be effective communicating your work to the wider world as you begin to write and publish in English. And I'll just highlight for you in this section of the presentation some of the most common English mistakes that people do tend to make in their writing and publishing, because if you know about the mistakes that people make, you can avoid them in your own work. What are the most common mistakes that people do tend to make? Well, they do tend to get caught out plagiarizing. We'll talk about that in a moment. Tenses and switches, spelling conventions, and inappropriate word use in English academic writing. These are the kinds of things we see all the time as editors. So if you know about them, you can learn to avoid them in your own writing. They include plagiarism, which of course is where you take another person's ideas, results or words without giving proper credit. This is academically dishonest. We'll talk about some aspects of publication ethics, writing and publishing ethics in a later presentation, or I can provide you with links and content to help you with that as well. How to be above board with your writing and with your publishing. Always avoid plagiarism. But lots of academic researchers around the world are simply unaware that self-plagiarism is an issue. You can't take something that you've written before in your own work and reuse it in a later paper. I know, surprising. I've done it myself. You too tend to think, I made that map, I made that figure, I wrote that text, I can use it again in my later papers, but you can't. You've got to cite yourself. And this is an issue for academic writers. It is an attempt to take your own previously published text, papers, or research results and then make them appear new in your subsequent writing. So you can't use a data set from a previous study without making your readers aware. You can't submit a paper for publication containing data, conclusions, or passages that have already been published. Cite, cite, cite. And of course, you can't publish multiple similar papers on the same study in different journals. That's called salami slicing, and that is also not okay. So what we did in order to educate, help people with these different topics is put down the common forms of academic plagiarism that we do tend to see in our business, in our editing, and in the academic publishing world. Mosaic plagiarism. That's where authors take data from a range of different sources, mix them together to make the new text appear original. No. Paraphrasing plagiarism. The words are different, but you've paraphrased the idea and plagiarism occurs. Self-plagiarism is where you should take your own previous results, use those images, use those texts, use those figures from your previous studies, but cite. And it's a major problem because many authors are simply unaware that it is an issue. One of the big problems in academic writing in English, self-accidental plagiarism. And it can happen. I mean, you read something in a second or third language, I know I do, and you think, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to use that in my own writing, but you should cite. And it's worth considering getting your documents checked, evaluated by a plagiarism checking service before submission, keeping careful records of all of your sources, using management tools, and check your articles because publishers, of course, will do that. They are looking for less than 10% similarity to previously published work when you make a submission to an international journal. Here's what a plagiarism check looks like. Software that searches against existing manuscripts in Crossref, in Scopus, and in other databases to see what your score is compared to previously published work. And this one's failed, 32%. That's way too high. We are looking for 10% or less in published academic work in your submissions. So your paper will go through this kind of check when you make a submission to an international journal. So it's worth having this in mind when you begin the process. Number one mistake that researchers do tend to make in their English writing is accidental plagiarism. So far in this webinar, we've talked a little bit about English communication skills, and I've hoped to convince you that English language can be a blocker to publication success. Keep it simple, short sentences, keeping your words understandable because most of your readers will not be native English speakers. We've talked about that, and we've also gone in and started to talk about some of the common mistakes that people make in their English writing and publishing. Number one mistake, self-plagiarism. Number two mistake, thinking about your tenses in writing. Remember your readers, how they're going to experience your paper. Getting your message across as we've discussed already, is often more important than being correct. One of the most common questions we often get asked, which tense should I use in the different sections of my paper? Well, keep it simple. Don't be overcomplicated. Keep it simple with the present tense as much as possible. The present tense is the best tense to use for accepted facts. I would say forget about the imperfect tenses in English, in your writing, in the present tense. Think about your readers. They are going to be experiencing your paper in the present moment. So, present tense in the introduction, in the results, and in most of the discussion. But in the method section, as we'll talk about a little bit later in our session this evening, you will be talking about what you did. So in the past tense, of course, in the discussion as well, some aspects of what might come in the future, some aspects of what kinds of work you might do in the future will also be important, but keeping it simple where possible. That's mistake number 2. Mistake number 3, which kind of spelling convention should you use? American versus British, American versus British. English, very, very important because different journals have different styles. Different manuscripts have different styles. Nothing drives an editor up the wall more quickly than if you mix different spelling conventions in the same paper. So do check your journal style guide. Do check your author's aim and scope to make sure if they're asking you for British English, then you are using that in your paper, as opposed to American English, but be consistent because there are a number of differences and it makes editors absolutely mad if they see different spellings of different words in American versus British in the same article. So that is worth keeping in mind. So mistake number 1 in English, plagiarism, especially self-plagiarism. Mistake number 2 in English, tenses in your paper. Mistake number 3 in English, American versus British spelling conventions. Mistake number 4, the use of the passive voice too much as opposed to the active voice. Most journals around the world these days prefer authors to use the active voice. And in English academic writing, it's not informal, it's the best approach. You have a look at your journal guide, your journal author instructions. Many of them, almost all of them, will be saying we prefer authors to write in the active voice. We recommend when writing your paper, use the active voice where possible. 80 to 90% of international journals now are asking, where possible, for authors to write in the active voice. We have incorporated, I collected, our team surveyed, we analyzed. It's easier, simpler, shorter sentences. Get your message across more effectively. Get your message across more quickly and more efficiently. So that's mistake number 4. Also, I will say as well, quickly in this presentation, be careful with how you start your sentences in English. Don't start sentences with coordinating conjunctions. These words that we remember with the fantastic acronym FANBOYS. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. We do not want those at the start of sentences. Also, avoid acronyms and abbreviations. DNA data were collected. You want to say, we collected DNA data. That puts the sentence into the first person and helps you to avoid starting the sentence with an abbreviation. Also with numbers, very important in English academic writing, avoid the use of numbers at the start of sentences. So a total of 8 data points rather than 8 data points. And don't forget as well that in English academic writing, we conventionally, that's right, conventionally write out those numbers up to 10 in in full form. So numbers up to 10, we write them out in full. Numbers above 10, 11 and higher are written out as numbers in the text, unless of course they are accompanied by a value or by a set of units or something like that. But in any case, be careful with how you start your sentences, and words to avoid in your writing would include emotional words. I've edited so many papers that say things like a fantastic example, a marvelous study, an amazing new result. These are emotional words. They sound informal in English. So we don't want to see superlatives. Very much more gigantic, earth-shattering, magnificent, marvelous, and fantastic are not the kinds of words that you should be using in your English writing. Formal, but active. Formal, but active, keeping the word choice as simple as possible. The fantastic potential of land use change, not such a good title. A new magnificent dinosaur, not such a good title. And I'm sure that you can think of examples from your own field. Relevant, particularly to medical sciences, we do not want to see qualifying the absolute. Be very, very careful, because adjectives in English are absolute. They cannot be modified. Something is either sterile or it's not. Something is either unique or it's not. It can't be very unique or quite unique. It is either unique or it's not. Although there are some, of course, there are always differences to these rules. There are some adjectives that have to be qualified with care. A woman can be recently pregnant, but of course she can't be slightly pregnant. So be careful with your use of adjectives in your English as well. And some of my favorite examples: misplaced modifiers, problematic pronouns, using multiple regression techniques. The animals in experiment 1 were. It sounds like the animals were using the multiple regression techniques. In assessing the damage, the plants exhibited numerous lesions. Were the plants really the ones assessing the damage? The spiders were inadvertently discovered while repairing a faulty growth chamber. Is it really the spiders doing the repairing of the growth chamber? These are examples of misplaced modifiers and problematic pronouns for you to keep in mind in your own writing. And our favorite of all, sloppy phrases. It has long been known that, correct to an order of magnitude, almost reached significance at the 5% level. Be that as it may, however, nevertheless, indeed, keep it simple. These words are often deletable by editors. By the way, cut them out of your writing. They are a waste of words, and they often can imply sloppy thinking. Just to finalize this section, common mistakes in English. One of the big ones as well is use of the word that versus which. If the clause can be omitted without leaving the modified noun incomplete, use which. Enclose the clause within commas, otherwise that. The lawnmower, which is broken, is in the garage. I can take out that intermediate clause, which is broken, from the sentence, and the sentence still makes sense. The lawnmower is in the garage. So if I'm able to do that, which goes into the sentence, but that is used in other examples. The lawnmower that is broken is in the garage. So is the lawnmower that works. No intermediate clause, no removal of a phrase from the sentence. The sentence still makes sense. You want to use that and which correctly. And redundancy in your writing is also very important. That box is small in size. Delete in size. That is rectangular in shape. It's redundant. That man is blue in color. It's redundant. Blue. That man is blue. Your argument is tenuous in nature. You can delete in nature. An editor will do that for you. It is a redundant use of words. And I would also encourage you as much as possible in your writing to be active. Use the active voice as much as possible because sentences written in the active voice are easier to understand and they require less words. That beaker was filled with water and then placed on the Bunsen burner is a waste of words. I filled the beaker with water and placed it on the Bunsen burner. The whole length of the highway was paved by the crew. It's a waste of words. The crew paved the whole length of the highway. Active as much as possible. Now, having talked about English communication and having talked a little bit about some of the common mistakes that people do tend to make in their writing, we will now quickly move on and talk a little bit about the different sections of your research writing. I know we don't have much time this evening, but if you would like us to come back and give a full training session for your university, for your research group, just get in touch with me. I would love to do that. There are hours and hours and hours of this content that we can provide to help you become more effective as researchers in terms of the structure of your article. And don't forget that we have talked already about your message, your audience, that's your target journal, and the structure of your writing. The general structure of an academic paper has a title and an abstract, and then it has the rest of the paper. And the title and abstract are key for indexing and searching. These are very, very important. Often, these particular parts of your paper will be the only bits that editors and peer reviewers will ever get to see. So your title needs to be effective, the shortest number of words possible. As we talked about last time, adequately describe the contents of your paper. Keep it short. Keep it short. The main issue, begin with the subject, accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete. No infrequently used abbreviations, and attract your readers. With your title, there is your main goal is to get people thinking, I want to read that paper. I want to find out what the answer is to the question in that article. So concise and informative. The most important words related to the topic, enticing your readers, not overly sensationalized. Very, very, very important. And as well, last time we talked about abstract writing. A good quality abstract is honest and precise. It stands alone, no technical jargon, short and specific, citing no references. Don't forget that this is what your editor will read. So they will look at your abstract. They will decide if the paper should be sent out for peer review or not. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? The 4 questions that form the basis of our academic article writing. Many journals now base their decisions on abstracts alone. We talked about this last time. Again, if you would like us to come back and provide more training for your institution, for your researchers in the future, we would love to do that. A structured abstract can help you to organize your ideas. Many journals ask for this. You can do this anyway. Put your thoughts and ideas into a structure, background, methodology, conclusions, and significance, answering those 4 questions that we talked about already in abstract writing. You can go in with your colored marker and look at well-written articles in the journals that you admire. You will see this structure in those papers. You will be able to see the 4 questions answered in your academic article examples. If you have articles, if you have journals, if you have papers that you've seen in journals that you admire, where you would like to see your papers published, go and look at the abstracts in those papers, because structure is the most important thing. Readers, they need to know throughout the paper where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. A plot is needed. And we looked at that famous IMRAD academic structure a little bit before. Don't forget that your paper is going to be about 5,000 words in length on average. So you have to balance the amount of words that you put into the different sections around the shape of your article. So in the introduction, grab the reader, bring them immediately to the crucial issue that your paper addresses. Keep the introduction short, 2 or 3 paragraphs if possible. Do not include a literature review. Nobody wants to read endless citations in your introduction. An opening sentence that takes you straight to the issue contains the most important details of the issue, a brief summary of the controversies and the best evidence, and ending your introduction with a crisp and clear research question that tells the reader how you plan to answer that question, keeping within the rules of good writing and using the active rather than the passive voice. 3 paragraphs, 3 sections for your introduction. State the question, give the reader the state of the art, and then tell them at the end of the introduction what your paper is going to do. Remember that hourglass shape for academic article writing. You start your introduction very general, and then you get more specific down towards the bottom. You've got about 1,500 words. That's it. About 1,500 words to write an effective introduction. In your methods section, give the reader the timeline sequence of events that you've worked on in your study. What did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third? What did you do fourth? And what did you do last? The data collection followed by the data analysis. This section provides all of the methodological details necessary for another scientist, another academic to duplicate your work. It should be a narrative of the steps that you took. And it is very important to always keep in mind that the methods section of your paper is the bit of your article where probably the reviewers and editors will have problems in peer review. So you must give enough detail here so that a qualified reader can repeat the study. If your method section is thin on details, editors are going to worry that you're hiding something. What statistical analyses did you use? Is your data watertight? What did you do? Data collection followed by data analysis. Show your method section to other researchers so that you can make sure that it is watertight before you make your submission. And often, by the way, methods and results sections have the same basic structure to them as you build out into your results. The same structure, often the same subheadings in the method section as you have in the results. In your results, you're talking about what you showed. You're talking about your data. You often make figures and tables before you start to write about those figures and tables. This section presents the results of the study, but does not attempt to interpret any meaning. As with the methods, the trick here is knowing what information to include or exclude. So make a structure, give your figures, describe your figures, and put them into the results and talk about the facts and nothing but the facts. No interpretation. That, of course, comes later. Ordering those different sections in your results around the primary and secondary outcomes in the same order, often as in the method section, and writing about your figures, writing about your tables in sequence is a great technique to get your results section put together effectively. Don't forget that often the methods and results have the same overall broad shape. And then in your discussion, we answer the question. We start the discussion section off with an answer to the question, what is it that the reader of this paper has been waiting to learn about? Here you tell them the answer, and then you get more general. You start specific. It's a triangle the right way up. You talk about what your study shows, and then you expand into the more interesting, broader context, the wider, bigger picture, interpreting your results in light of other published data, relating your discussion back to the objectives and questions, and limiting your conclusions to what your data actually support, suggesting future directions for research, new methods, and future areas of endeavor. Because if you don't, Somebody else will read your paper and come up with those ideas themselves, and you want people to cite you. Don't write an expansive essay that extrapolates wildly from what you found. Start your discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings and talk about both the strengths and weaknesses of your study. In your discussion, you are going to be relating your study to what's already been found, discussing what your study means, and talking about any unanswered questions. How do your results fit with what's already known? What are the strengths and weaknesses? And talk about what is going to happen next. And do not finish your paper with a weak phrase at the end like more research will be needed or future research will be required. Those are cliches. Editors will remove them. We want you to finish strong. Writing a paper is just like running a race. At the end, you will be finishing with your most important conclusions. It's going to have the same basic structure as the results section. You are going to be working your paper into this IMRAD academic article structure. What's your message? Who are the target audience? And what will the structure for your writing be? Keeping this overall structure in your mind at all times. In our session today, we have talked about English language communication skills. We've also talked about some of the most common mistakes that authors do tend to make when writing papers, and we've begun to talk about writing those different sections of our articles. I know it's been very short. It's been short, but if you would like us to come back and provide further training, follow-up training, additional training in detail, research, training, and consultancy for your researchers, for you to help you get your paper written up and published, I would be absolutely delighted to do that, because the point of this is to help you be more effective as an academic. It's very, very important for you to be as effective as possible writing and publishing your research as an academic. So thank you once again for joining us. It's my pleasure to do these sessions. My name's Gareth. I want to thank a few people. You can see them here on the slide, as well as our wonderful moderator who's back as well. Thank you so much for doing this for us. We have a link for you there. You can access digital editing at the AJE website, or you can get in touch with me at any time. I would be delighted to help you with your writing and publishing. Thank you so much, and I'll pass back over to you now. I think, Dua, thank you so much for your time and your attention, everybody. How are we doing?
Thank you, Dr. Gareth, for such informative presentation as usual. We're already excited for today's session and for week 3 and for week 4. And we hope that it will not be the end with IVPN students. So thank you, Dr. Gareth, and for your energy during the whole session. I believe we learned a lot from this today's session. So if you have any question to Dr. Gareth, now the floor is open for the Q&A section. So write down on the Q&A section if you have any questions to Dr. Gareth. I will read them to him. Thank you.
Don't forget, we're going to provide everybody with certificates, with recordings, like you can listen back again. If anyone wants to get the slides, like I've given those to Michelle as well, so hopefully she'll be able to share them with everybody. So thank you again, everybody, for your attention, and thanks for coming for this. I think you're muted, Dora. Any questions?
Okay, we have a question from Yusra. She said that, can you suggest plagiarism app, please?
Can I suggest an app for academic writing, or is that the question?
Yeah, it's a question. App for plagiarism.
Oh, an app for plagiarism. Well, there's a great Turnitin is the best one, but there are several others that you can have a look at. I can send you some links to some of them that are free online, but yeah, like Turnitin is the one that we use, and we can provide you with access to that if you want to get in touch with us. We'll help you out with that. So yeah, have a look at that one. Turnitin is the software package that we use that searches against like Crossref databases and so on. So thank you so much.
Okay, another question: how we can check plagiarism?
Well, the best way to check plagiarism is to keep a good track of the citations that you use in the first place, and carefully cite work when it goes into your own papers. But again, like you can check plagiarism by using software tools like Turnitin, for example, and I can certainly give you access to that if you get in touch with me at the end of the session. But that's the best way. Journals use it when you make submissions to international journals. They check work against standard databases, and they're looking for 10% or less in terms of similarity if they're going to send your paper out for peer review. So that's worth having a look at. Thank you for the question.
Okay, there is a question from Sarah. Sarah, she asked that, is this the last session? No, Sarah, there is week 3 and week 2 again. This is the second session from Research Journey. There is another question. Can we use paraphrasing tools?
You can, but there are several techniques that you can have a look at if you want to paraphrase. Paraphrasing is where you take some text that's been written about in another paper and rewrite it in your own style in your own article. That's paraphrasing, but you should always cite the original source, even if you're paraphrasing and rewriting text from another paper. That's something that we would always recommend that you do. There are techniques that you can use to paraphrase. Turning the work from the third person into the first person is one way. Even translating into another language and then retranslating back is another technique that you can have a go at using for effective paraphrasing. But that's a great question. And yeah, let me also say about Sarah's question, like this is just session 2, like there's 2 more to go, like over the next 2 weeks. So do tune in for the subsequent 2 sessions as well. And thank you for all your comments. It's brilliant.
Okay, another question, an awkward hypothetical situation. If my professor make writing mistakes, how can I correct them without embarrassing them?
Oh, that's a great question. How can you correct the mistakes of somebody without embarrassing them? Well, I would say that you could use like a spell checking tool. You could use the AJE AI writing tool that's linked on the screen in front of you. You can go in there, you can get like a free trial of that. If you're not doing the corrections yourself, then I think a lot of embarrassment could potentially be avoided in that way. But also, like when you comment on the work of other people, keep it positive. Say, well, you know, have you considered this change? Have you thought about this change to make the paper flow a little bit better? Just be positive, and I think people will always appreciate that.
Okay, a question from Eliza. I hope I pronounce it right. Eliza says that how to avoid unintentional plagiarism.
How to avoid unintentional plagiarism. Well, this is very difficult. I mean, the best way is to keep careful track of what you cite yourself in your articles to make sure that you're not inadvertently reusing some text from another published work. But yeah, like again, like I can help you to get your work checked by a number of the online plagiarism tools if you'd like to get in touch with me at the end of the session. But yeah, the best way to avoid unintentional plagiarism is just to make sure you keep track of what you read and keep track of text that you're using from other papers in your own work. I think that would be the best way to do that. But thank you for that great question.
Another question from Eliza. Would you suggest using title rating sites such as Headlines Studio or for articles? Is it good approach to make a good title for the article?
It can be. It depends upon your subject area, Elisa. You want to get your keywords or some of your keywords into your title. Have a look at the keyword database, the keyword databases that are out there in your subject area, okay? And come up with some good keywords when you next complete a piece of research. It's a good idea to look and come up with maybe 10 or 15 keywords that would adequately describe your next piece of research when you start to put together your title, because then you can put a number of those keywords into the title and into the abstract. You don't want to keep the keywords and the title, the words that you use in your keywords and in your title should be kept separate. You shouldn't use the same words in your title that you've used in your keyword section, because the way that search engines work, that could be a waste of words. So that's a great question, and thank you for that question.
Thank you, Doctor. Another question from Yusra. Yusra said, paraphrasing plagiarism, shall we avoid it?
If you can, I would say so. Yeah, like it's better to try to rewrite things in your own words if you can. Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you for that question.
Okay, question from Isaac. Say, do you think it is appropriate to use paraphrasing tool?
No, it's not inappropriate. I mean, it's perfectly okay to use a paraphrasing tool. Just make sure that the paraphrasing that you're doing is cited, because then if you're citing the work from which the paraphrasing comes, you're never going to get caught out by any of these online checking tools. So that, I think, is an important consideration. So fine to use them, of course, but always keep in mind that you should be citing the original source in your paper. I would say that's the best way to avoid getting caught out plagiarizing, is to make sure that you cite those original sources. Okay, so thank you for that great question. Wonderful.
Okay, they ask you about how we can get in touch with you to get access for Turnitin.
Drop me an email or send me a WhatsApp message. The contact numbers are there on the screen. That's how you get in touch with me. So yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely fine. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay, a question, is it okay to use paraphrasing in writing?
Of course, it's very okay to use paraphrasing in writing. Everybody does it, but you must cite where you're taking ideas from. So if you want to paraphrase from somebody else's paper, of course you can, but you should cite that original source. And we've talked quite a lot about paraphrasing. Maybe it's worth thinking about in the future doing a separate session for this group on how to paraphrase, how to rewrite text from other papers in our own work. But thank you for your questions, everybody. Great question.
Okay, another question from Mohammed. Can you recommend a dictionary for academic writing?
I can. It depends upon your subject area, because there are different academic dictionaries for different subject areas. So if it's a pharmaceutical research field, then I would look for a specific dictionary thesaurus for that particular research area, I would say. And I know that there are such things out there. So have a look for pharmaceutical or medical science, health sciences dictionary thesaurus, and that would be a good starting point. If you get stuck, of course, you can always get in touch with me, and I'd be delighted to help you with any further questions.
A question from Nimra. How to select a research topic or review paper?
How to select a research topic or a review paper? Well, generally speaking, Nimra, as a young researcher building your career, you should be aiming to write original research papers. Review papers are something different. Review papers are invited by editors, invited by journals, and are not something often that young up-and-coming researchers are writing. You should be writing research topic-based articles. This is a very general question, though, how to select a research topic. If you do drop me a message, I'll send you some videos, some other content about how to identify a knowledge gap within your research area, how to identify that and how to build an effective research project around that particular knowledge gap process, because that's a very important early stage in the research process, in the research journey. But great question, Nimra. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you about this offline. Thank you.
Okay, a question from Dima Ismail. When writing a definition of a term, which we paraphrase or just use parentheses and the citation?
Either way, Dima, but if it's a definition of a term that's been used in many previous studies in your area, then the best thing to do is cite a selection of previous uses of that term rather than rework and rewrite your own definition. I would say, the definition of this term used in this paper follows X, Y, and Z citations, and be historic and be specific with your citations. I think that's a great question as well. We have another one about citing myself. You should cite yourself, of course, but not over the top. You don't want to cite like too many of your own papers. You need to cite broadly, and you need to cite in a fair and balanced way, because if you don't, then peer reviewers and editors will notice that. So when selecting citations to use in your study, give a broad overview of the field, historical citations, citations in different languages, like that show that you have that overall understanding of the subject area, but also like you don't want to be citing just your own papers, because that's of course going to be that doesn't look great. So yeah, I hope that helps. Good question. Thank you.
Question from Isaac. In a paper, how do I know when an author is using an idea that is his or her and when not, especially in the introduction section?
Well, you should know, you should be able to tell, because they should be citing previous sources if the idea is not theirs in the introduction. And as you get more experience, like reading papers and working in your subject area, you'll start to be able to assess whether or not that really is an original idea that's being written about by that author if they're not citing older studies. So this is one reason why having a journal group or having a study group or having a group of researchers in your area where you get together and talk about literature that's being published in your research area is such a good idea. The IVPN is a great place for that, because you are struggling to understand these kinds of questions on your own. So share the paper with others, talk about the paper with other researchers and ask them that question. Is this idea that, Dr. Isaac is suggesting in his paper, is that really an original idea? It's very difficult on your own to get up to that level of expertise. So I would say talk about papers with others, set up journal groups within your subject area, use the IVPN network to enable that. And then you can much more quickly and easily get to the place where you're able to assess publications that get published in your research area. But that's a fantastic question, Isaac. Thank you for that. Brilliant.
A comment and a question from Nimra. Your presentation is very good. How did you do this?
This presentation? Oh, I love doing these kinds of presentations. So thank you for the opportunity to do it. Thanks to the colleagues at IVPN Student. And yeah, hopefully we'll do lots more of this kind of training. It's absolutely great. So thank you so much for the chance to do it. Thank you.
Okay, a question from Elisa. It can be an awkward question to ask, but is it appropriate to use quotation in article?
Yeah, you can, but you don't want to do it too much, because if you just end up putting lots of quotations into your paper, it breaks the flow, it makes the paper harder to read. So I would say you can do it, but only for really important and really critical pieces of information. Okay, so if you can paraphrase, if you can rewrite in your own words, that's better. But you can, of course, make quotations, put them in indents, put them in like quotation marks and cite the source as well. But I wouldn't do it too much, Elisa, because it breaks the flow and it makes I mean, you've seen papers that contain lots of quotations. They're very hard to read. They're very hard to follow. So yeah, I do it, but do it like in a limited way. Thanks for the question.
Okay, a question from Ashna. How to write a short but effective introduction without plagiarism?
Wow, that's a very broad question, but your introduction, it's going to be like a triangle upside down. So how to write it effectively? Start off with the big question that your paper is going to address, right? The big question, and talk about that in the first part of your introduction. Then you talk about why this research is particularly interesting. What's the state of the art? Why is this like a broad and interesting topic? So at the top, like, you know, what's the big picture? Then why is this interesting and important? And then at the end of the introduction, tell the reader what your paper, what your article is going to do. Okay, so those will be my tips. 3 sections for an introduction. Why is it important? The big picture, what's currently known in this particular field, the state of the art, and then what this particular study is going to do. If you struggle with writing an effective introduction, have a look at nature and science papers in your field that are written, and because those are edited to be effective and they have that 3-part structure to them. So I hope that helps. Ashna, if we can help more with specific questions, or you'd like to come back and ask us more questions about your particular piece of writing, then, I mean, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you so much for that question.
Actually, I read many comments about today's session that I can't skip them. So thank you, Dr. Garris, for such informative session. The way you deliver your language is appreciable. Not a question, but thank you, doctor, for your energy is incredible. So thank you. Another question from Isaac. Paraphrasing can be tricky. To what extent can I paraphrase? Lets the session lose its original meaning. When it's impossible to change to the word in a sentence during paraphrasing, what number of words from the original sentence is deemed okay?
Well, I mean, let's answer the last part of that first. Like, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Like, there's no number of words from the original sentence that will be deemed okay. Like, these are very specific questions, Isaac. And so if you would like to send me some sentences that you're having trouble paraphrasing, let's talk about this like in specific examples, because to what extent can I paraphrase a sentence so that it doesn't lose its original meaning? I mean, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. We have to look at specific individual examples. I mean, you are looking to rewrite something in your own way, but cite the original. Okay, so you're not going to get accused of plagiarizing what somebody's written before, because you're going to be citing what they wrote. So, you know, that, I mean, there are techniques that you can apply for plagiarism. We need a separate session to talk about those in detail, and I'd need to give you some specific worked examples from your own subject area. So sorry for not answering that very specific question in more detail this evening, but I mean, what number of words from the original sentence is deemed okay? I mean, I can take the words from a sentence and change them completely in order, so they're all the same words, but in a different order, and that would be a paraphrased sentence. So let's have a look at some specific examples. But thank you for that great question. Thank you.
I think this is the last question for now from Dima. When I'm writing a paragraph that is fully paraphrased from an article, should I cite the end or after each sentence?
You don't have to cite after each sentence, Dima. You just have to make it clear to the reader that you are aware of your sources. Okay, so there are a number of ways that you can do that. You can start the sentence or the phrase by talking about the previous pieces of research, you know, and then talk about them, or you can cite at the end of the phrase, like, you know, the comments, the remarks made in this paragraph come from X, Y, and Z previous studies. Okay, so yeah, again, like, it's not this is creative work, so there are no hard and fast rules on what you should and should not be doing, but you should be citing. And that's the best thing always to keep in mind from all of this. If I'm taking information from somebody else, I need to cite them. I need to acknowledge them in my own work. But thank you for the fantastic questions. Thank you everybody for all your great questions this evening. It's been very, very engaging. Lots of great information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garis. I think we can end up with the Q&A session if you have time, because we have many questions.
Yeah, I mean, whenever, like, just get in touch with me at any time, everybody. I'm happy to talk more and follow up with everybody and answer any questions that you have. So, like, thank you so much for your time and energy this evening. I'll see you next week for the next one.
Dr. Garis, thank you. There is many questions in the Q&A session about the records and the slides. So the record and the slides will be available on the IVPN library for your access of all of you. And a quick announcement that there are some participants who did not type in their names well in the previous session. Kindly fill in your details correctly in the Google form will be put in the Q&A session section of the Zoom, so that we can able to fill in correct details on your certificates. And thank you for today's session, and hope to see you again for week 3 and week 4 of the research journey of the IVPN Students Professional Development Committee. And I want to thank Dr. Garis for his acceptance and for his great presentation. Thank you, Dr. Garis, and thank you, everyone.